Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is a free call. 1-855-450-NOAH. It's 1-855-450-6624 or send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah Show kicks off this hour. Before we go any further, I want to make sure to get the word out. Southeast Linux Fest is happening this coming week. It's taken a long time to get all of the pieces in place, particularly during a virtual event in which the speakers and the audience is going to be remote. And so there hasn't been a lot of direct communication on that. And I apologize for that. That is happening this coming weekend. So join us on Friday for Southeast Linux Fest. You can learn more at southeastlinuxfest.org. There you can sign up to receive emails direct to your inbox about the latest. It's going to be hosted entirely on Matrix this year. So we're excited to see that. Again, your emails, your phone calls, they go to the front of the line at the program. Our first email comes in from Ryan this hour. He says, "Good evening, Noah. Thanks for everything you do for the community through the Ask Noah show. I'm trying to improve my daily PC workflow. I work the most number of hours on a Windows laptop provided by a client, but I prefer my Linux laptop and my Linux desktop for many tasks. I've been trying to set up a desktop with one keyboard and one mouse and the easiest navigation between laptops and the desktop as possible. In the past, I've used my laptop monitor, but I have two 27-inch monitors in which I would like to use exclusively for visually switching between my laptop screen and my 27-inch 1080p monitor. It's beginning to start to stress my eyes. Up until now, I've used an HDMI switch, a USB switch, plus an HDMI/DVI/VGA switch. I use this on the monitor itself. Now, this is pretty clunky. I have considered that a better solution may be a software solution, something like Remina. But with my Linux desktop having direct monitor, keyboard, mouse connections, my biggest challenge is that my Windows laptop provided by my client is very locked down. In other words, I have no admin access. Some hardware solution is probably necessary in this case, but I'm doubtful that a USB-C dock exists that will do more than add more toggle buttons and confusion to my desktop. Ideally, I would like to have the option to utilize both monitors for any one PC or give any one PC, any one monitor, and another PC to another monitor. Can you recommend any combination of hardware and software solutions to meet my needs?" So, I guess we could break this down. There's a couple different ways you could attack this problem, Ryan. The first is you could attack it with a hardware solution. So you could do something like a number of KVM switches or a KVM switch that you plug each individual device and you just sit down. This would be the traditional way to do it, right? You sit down with your 27-inch monitor, and you have a KVM switch that cycles between them. Now, that obviously doesn't address your second monitor situation, in which case I suppose the only way to do that would be to have a second KVM switch. But that would eliminate the issue of you've got one keyboard, you've got one mouse, and then you just roll the monitors. You'd have to switch, the second one by hand. But that would probably get you there. And every time you want to add a new computer that you want to access from the single keyboard, mouse, and monitor setup, then you would just add that to your KVM switch. Now, there is a more elegant solution, a piece of software called Synergy. It's made by a company called Simless. You can learn more at simless.com, simless.com/Synergy. And of course, we'll have a link for you in the show notes at podcast.asknoahshow.com. What Synergy does is it allows you to control your computers with one keyboard and one mouse. It's using entirely software to do this. And so you can set up the way that your laptops or multiple desktops or multiple collection of laptops and desktops are arranged. And Synergy is going to seamlessly move your mouse cursor and keyboard to the machine that you're on. So, for example, if you had your work laptop set up to the right, in Synergy you would configure it set up to the right, and when you move your mouse far enough to the edge of the screen on your primary desktop, the mouse is going to start to automatically move via magic software on your laptop. Now, there are two things I'd like you to consider here. First of all, Synergy is not an open source piece of software, and you're giving it access to your keyboard and your mouse inputs. And so you better really trust the company Simless. For this reason, it's why I don't use it on any of my critical production machines. It's not that it's not It's not that it is not a well-established, reputable piece of software, because it absolutely is that. It's just not a well-established, reputable piece of software that I can crawl under and look at the code or pay somebody to look at the code. And so I don't for sure know what's happening under the hood. And that's somewhat concerning. But it is nonetheless the exact software solution that somebody in your situation would be looking for. And so it's something I'm going to throw out there as an option. Now, I'll tell you what I have personally gone to, because I somewhat wind up in this same boat. Let's start with this. I have my own business. I have Altispeed Technologies, and of course, I fund my own laptop from Altispeed Technologies. The company gives me a laptop, and because I own the company, obviously I can set up the laptop any which way I want. And so there aren't really any restrictions on what I can do on that laptop. That's not always the case, though. However, I have contracts that are negotiated either through the military for doing work on the Air Force base that's here in town, as well as the university systems. Oftentimes when we do those kinds of contract jobs or subcontracting for another IT company even, oftentimes we'll be required to use a laptop that they issue, much like you're doing. I also have part-time jobs where I work directly for my home church, for example, as well as the radio station. I'm employed there directly, and so in those situations, I get no say in the computer that's handed to me. And so I've made just one request of any client or any organization that I'm working with, and it's that they provide me a laptop with a Thunderbolt docking capability. And I explain, very clearly that my workflow, as well as my physical health, if I'm going to be expected to sit in front of a computer for 9-10 hours a day, I would very much like my back not to go out. And to do that, I need to have proper posture. I need to sit at the proper height, and I need to have monitors that are adjusted to that proper height, and so on and so forth. Additionally, as far as productivity goes, if I have a dual monitor setup or a triple monitor setup, that gives me the opportunity to be more productive and multitask more effectively and get the task done. And most business, in fact, all businesses have been receptive to that. And the few times that I've run into pushback, it's been something like, hey, today we can't do that because we've not budgeted for that, but in the future we would be happy to consider something like that. And so even in those cases, I have been given a laptop that has a USB-C port on it, and I can use a regular Type-C dock, even though it's not Thunderbolt. Now, here's what that gets you. My Thunderbolt dock, I have 3 of them. I have one that sits at my work office, it is structured to be aesthetically pleasing because clients oftentimes have to visit with me inside of my office. And so my office has to be presentable for other people. And so there's a small, reasonable 24-inch monitor that sits off to the corner with a standard little keyboard, a little mouse, and 2 little speakers. And that's my office computer, right? Then at home, I have my actual desk that is tailored around the way that I want to work. And the way that I want to work is 2 gigantic 4K 27-inch monitors that are on risers, so it gets it right to the right height. I have an uplift desk that is suited. I'm a short person, so when I'm seated and my feet are 90 degrees on the floor, the desk height for me has to be 29.5 inches. And so I figured that out. And I have a desk that goes down to 29.5 inches. Not all of them do. And I have a keyboard and mouse. And because I am somewhat of an audiophile, I like listening to good music and having that music delivered in crystal clear audio. Or if I'm editing video or audio, obviously I want to be able to hear all of those things. I have some very nice studio reference speakers that are connected to that Thunderbolt dock. And so I take let's say my Altispeed laptop, and I plug it into my dock downstairs, and I'm able to use that in my lab at home. And I have, good audio, and I have nice big monitors, and I have a good comfortable keyboard, and everything is at the right height, and everything's just laid out perfectly ergonomically for me. I can take that exact same laptop and go into my office. And even though it's not an ideal working environment because the computer working space is kind of off to the corner, I'm still able to get the majority of things done. And at the end of the day, all of my files and all of my applications and everything that's set up translates because it was just one computer that went one place to the other. I have a third docking station that I've nicknamed Minimum Viable Battle Station, or MVBS. And the idea between MVBS is oftentimes we'll go out to a client location and we're going to be there for 1 week or 2 weeks. We just wrapped up a job where we were on a client location for six and a half weeks, doing a job. Doesn't do me a lot of good to have the most ergonomic, well-designed, whatever a Thunderbolt docking station if it's sitting down in my basement and I'm not there to use it, right? Especially if I'm out of town. And so where MVBS comes in is it was specifically designed from the standpoint of what is the minimum amount of desk space I need to get a 4K 27-inch monitor. And I figured that out, and then plus lay the keyboard out and lay the mouse out, and what do I need to comfortably rest my hands, and what are the dimensions of that? And I figured that out, and to try something, I cut it out of a piece of plywood and just sat down and said, does this work? And sure enough, it worked flawlessly. And I was able to figure out, this is the minimum amount of workspace that I need to get my job done. And then went and bought an actual piece of hardwood and bought a sit stand, frame that I use when it's sitting in its normal resting position at our office. But if it needs to go out to a client location, there are a series of Pelican cases that the entire thing breaks down, goes into 2 or 3 Pelican cases, and then can be moved out and reassembled in 10 or 15 minutes, anywhere. And that is, again, a Thunderbolt dock. So as it relates to multiple machines, when I got my laptop from Leighton Broadcasting and they said, you don't get a say in it, we're just going to give you a laptop, it'll be set up the way that we want it to be set up, I said, okay, can I get it with a Thunderbolt connection? And they were kind enough to oblige that. I now took the exact same 3 desktop work environments that I had set up for my Ultispeed laptop, and I set it up to use with my Leighton laptop. I just plugged the Thunderbolt cable in, and boom, all of my monitors, my keyboard, my printers, and all the things that I had set up came to life. And so when I'm working in my office, I can do there. When I'm working out at home, I can do there. And when I'm working in the field, I have an option to use it there. And I eventually circled back to them and said, hey, would you be willing to buy me Thunderbolt docking station for my little desk cubicle at the station? They said, yeah, sure, we can do that. And so now I have a station there. And I took my personal laptop, which is an X1 Carbon, and I've started using that again, I didn't invest anything in my personal computing space. I just had a laptop. But because I had built all of this infrastructure out for other purposes, and it's all Thunderbolt, any Thunderbolt laptop now can get connected to my 2 27-inch monitors. And so when my wife comes to me and says, hey, could you rip these DVDs for us or these Blu-rays for us, or can you edit these home videos for the kids? I would never be able to justify the expense of studio reference speakers and nice big displays for my personal use, because I just don't. First, I don't have enough time to do stuff for personal use, but I can justify those things for work. I'm able to repurpose all of those things because of the tremendous flexibility of Thunderbolt. So that's a long way of saying that the answer to your solution, if you can arrange it, is Thunderbolt. And with Intel opening the spec for Thunderbolt and including that essentially as part of the next generation of USB 4, that is going to quickly become the standard on laptops. And I think you're going to have a hard time finding one that doesn't have Thunderbolt capability sometime in the near future. And so that would be my strong suggestion if you can push your clients in the direction that way. And at least even if you can't, that's still what I would hold as the ultimate solution, then kind of work your way back from there with what you can accomplish. As far as actually connecting a desktop, I've looked high and low. There are very few desktops that support Thunderbolt. I did buy a couple of the Intel Nooks, which do have Thunderbolt in them. One of the pieces of software I like to play with from time to time is DAZ 3D, which is a 3D modeling software, and it's only available for Windows. And I'm not the kind of person that is going to install Windows on any of my computers, but I don't necessarily have an objection to buying a dedicated little a Nook and installing a copy of Windows 10 and just DAZ 3D. And when I want to use it, I take out this little thing that sits ordinarily inside of the box on a shelf and plug it into the Thunderbolt dock. And there, now I have access to a keyboard, mouse, monitor. I don't have to assemble entire desktop. I've just connected one cable. So it's kind of a way to kind of cheat and get around some of the barriers that may exist. Our second email comes in from Amit. Amit writes in and says, hi, Noah. This is Amit from Israel. First of all, thanks for the great show and everything you do for the community. I usually do not write in or engage with the community, but this time I think I have a solution for the caller Tony from episode 234. If I understand his concern correctly, he wishes to have some sort of way to roll back a physical server in the event that an update failed as a result of an issue. This can actually be achieved with a utility called Boom. You can learn more at github.com/snapshotmanager/boom. Also, redhat.com, and he gives a link to booting a RHEL LVM snapshot. So I want to give a little bit of backstory here just so we're all on the same page. LVM is essentially a way of of combining a physical disk into a pool and then redistributing that out and creating disks on top of that pool. It's called Logical Volume Manager, and it's something that was introduced in RHEL back in maybe 6, I think, maybe even earlier than that, maybe Tale of 5, I think 6 though. And LVM is a fantastic way to manage your disks if you don't have access to something like ZFS. Back to the email, Boom allows creating a grub entry out of every LVM snapshot, which means that you can boot into the server state as it was prior to the failed update, delete the snapshot containing the failed update attempt. The Red Hat article has a detailed how-to on how to do this. However, I couldn't find a port for Ubuntu, which Tony uses, so he may have to recompile. Hope this helps. All the best, Amit. And of course, Amit, thank you very much for writing in. I have not previously used Boom. I've used LVM and I've used snapshots, but I've never used Boom. And so it's interesting to know that there is a utility out. Of course, we'll have that link for you in the show notes, podcast.asknoahshow.com. Our third email comes in from Dan. Dan writes in and says, "Hi, Noah. I hope you all are doing well. I'm starting a business, and I've been an open source advocate and Linux fan since way back. Now that I'm starting my business with security and privacy invasions being worse than ever, I'm looking for a package of Linux apps that would help, particularly in MRP, also known as a manufacturing resource program. Do you know of any, or does your outstanding audience have any advice or favorites? Thanks a lot, Dan." And this one I am going to punt to the audience. I don't know anything about manufacturing resource programs. I'm not in the manufacturing industry. I have very little of, I think we've had one client in 15 years that worked in manufacturing. So I don't know a lot about it, but I'm going to throw that out to the community and see what comes back. So Dan, listen in next week and the weeks following for an update on that. I'm sure somebody will have the answer to your question. Our pick of the week this week is QZIND Tray. So this is a browser plugin for sending documents and raw commands to a printer or an attached device. I'll get into where the specific use case of where this application came into momentarily, but I want to talk about the software project as a whole to begin with. So this is a small little applet that you install on your computer, and essentially what it allows you to do is tie a local printer and advertise or have that local printer communicate with a web-based application. So the way that I have specifically used this application is at our church we have it's kids camp, and so all of the kids come in for a week, and they're coming in and hanging out and participating in activities. And obviously this is something that it's not typically geared towards just the families that normally attend the church. It's also kind of an invitation for communities kind of around the neighborhood and around the city. And as part of that, though, a typical attendance where it may be just a few hundred kids obviously doubles or even in some cases triples with the amount of kids that are coming through the door. And so tracking them becomes of paramount concern for safety and all of those things. And so one of the things that the church likes to do is print out little tags that have both the child's name as well as allergies and stuff like that are printed on the tag itself, and then a pickup tag for the parent. So when the parent comes back and says, "I want to take this kid home," you can verify and say, "Okay, you have the right pickup tag. You can take the kid." And then there's a positive correlation there. The problem is that you want to be able to talk to these printers and you want to share them out so the devices that are running the software that are checking in can talk to the web-based application that's checking the kids in, can then print and access local printers. Or in our case, we wanted to actually share that printer between a number of devices. So I took a bunch of Lenovo ThinkCenters, tiny little micro ThinkCenters that are maybe only 4-8 inches long and maybe only an inch tall. And connected them to a printer, and I used the QZ Tray app to share that printer to the web-based application. And so the QZ Tray, it just starts up. It's an open source application, starts up and runs a browser plugin, and then the browser is able to send documents and raw commands to a printer attached. It can also then share that printer over the network so that other devices are able to access it as well. Now that leads us right into our gadget of the week. The gadget of the week is the Zebra ZD420, specifically the ZD400 series, because they make it in a bunch of different variants. Now, this is a direct thermal or transfer thermal printer. It's designed for printing the name tags that I was just talking about. The thing I like about the Zebra 420, first of all, natively works with Linux. It's literally as simple as plugging in the USB cable, clicking the add printer button, choosing the driver, which is it was built right into my Ubuntu or Kubuntu distribution, and the printer worked, no tweaking whatsoever required. Zebra manufactures some of the highest quality devices out there, and they're typically used in professional industry. So this is the kind of printer that you would see if you went into a hospital and had like a wristband printed or a name tag printed. Zebra is the company that makes the little handheld PDAs that you often see either in healthcare, or often you'll see them in industry for scanning tags and doing inventory and those kinds of things. They make very high-end industrial devices, and the printers are no exception. Some of the best little printers I've ever worked with in my life. And I've been blown away with their quality and the ease of use and all of those kinds of things. I was using it next to a competitor of Zebra's, and the competitor essentially had this reset procedure where it tried to figure out where the label was, and there was a single little laser, and it kind of worked. With the Zebra printer, not only is the laser repositionable, so you can do a variety of different size labels or a variety of different style labels, it also has the ability of having a external label cutter. And so if the label comes out, it'll actually chop the label off and spit the label the rest of the way out, and that prevents the user from walking up to a kiosk and pulling on the label and stripping out the little gears that have the motor that run the rollers. So they've really put a lot of thought into the way that this device works. Now, the ZD420 is available with a variety of configurations. You can buy it as just a USB printer that starts at just under $400. You can buy it with a Bluetooth module, a network module, a Bluetooth low energy module, and all of these can be used then to pair with things like iPads or Android devices, mobile devices. Again, you can use it with the QZ Tray app to share it with so that a host of different devices running a host of different operating systems can all speak to it. And again, the quality is just above and beyond. So this actually, one of the things I think we're going to do with it is look at using it for doing mailing labels and printing postage. And I haven't dug in totally on that, so I'm not exactly sure if we'd use like a stamps.com thing, or if there's a better solution, or if there's some security things involved with when it comes to printing postage, if you can just use any label printer. But if I'm looking for a printer to print labels, specifically thermal labels, I will never look any further than the ZD420 from Zebra. Again, we'll have a link in the show notes at podcast.asknoahshow.com. In the news this week, Amazon leads the way with what they're calling Amazon Sidewalk. Now, this is the next evolution of cloud. If you've listened to the show for any period of time, then you knew something like this was coming. On June 8th, Amazon will automatically enroll devices in the Amazon Sidewalk. This new wireless mesh service will share a small slice of the internet bandwidth with nearby neighbors who don't have connectivity, and will help to share their bandwidth with you when you don't have a connection. By default, this is going to be on, and that's what's so atrocious about it, is that Amazon has made this decision, and they haven't given a lot of notice. I think this came out like a week ago, and it's getting turned on by default today. So if you have an Amazon device, and that includes the Alexa, the Echo, the Ring, any of their security cameras, if you have even their outdoor lights, motion detectors, tile trackers, all of these are going to be enrolled in the system and have this feature turned on by default. And let's face it, the vast majority of people out there don't actually dig into these settings. Geeks, we log in, we change all the settings, we customize everything to our liking, we go through and look for things, we scour this stuff for things that might invade privacy or settings that aren't to our liking, make sure all the passwords are changed. Vast majority of people, millions of people, they're not doing that. They just plug the thing in and they use it and they're happy with it. And so millions of people are going to have opted into this program, and they may not even know anything about it. And so that's what I'm here to share with you. Amazon Sidewalk is a shared network that helps devices work better. It's operated by Amazon at no charge to customers. Oh, well, let's talk about that in a second. Sidewalk can help simplify new device setup. It can extend low bandwidth working range of devices to help find pets or valuable things with tile trackers, and help devices stay online even if they're outside the range of their home Wi-Fi. In the future, Sidewalk will support a range of experiences, from using Sidewalk-enabled devices such as smart security and lighting and diagnostic for applications and tools. So let's break this down for a little bit. I paid for an internet connection, and I put it in my house, and I connected it to my router, which I paid for, and my wireless access points, which I paid for, and then my Amazon devices, in a world where I bought Amazon devices and connected it to my network, which I don't, but I digress. So I purchased my Alexa and my Echo and my Ring security cameras and my outdoor lights and my motion detectors, and I have tile trackers on all of my things. And I've paid for all of those things with my own hard-earned money. Now, previously, at Altispeed Technologies, for example, we would go into a business, and a business might say, we want people to be able to walk up to our door. We want people to be able to push a doorbell, and we want an attendant either sitting at a computer or at a door station to be able to communicate with that person, find out what they want, see if they look like they're a friendly human being that would just like to come in and do business, or if it's a dude standing there with 2 Uzis and we should probably call the police, and then take action, i.e. call the police and leave the door locked, or push a button and open the door. And so we install something like an Elgo SIP door phone, and the user can come up and push that button, or we can use something like an Axis door phone, which actually has a camera built into it. They push the doorbell actuator button, and that rings either a SIP phone on the other end or rings a security station that has all of the cameras up. That person can then look and see what's going on, and then either by pushing a DTMF key on the phone to send a signal to open the strike or the maglock, or choose to leave the door closed. All of that can be done, and we've been installing those systems for 5-10 years, and that's never been a problem. What changed is people ultimately decided one day that they didn't want to go that route. They didn't want to pay a professional to do it, and they didn't want to learn how to do it themselves. They didn't want to listen to a show like this where I will tell you what models and makes and stuff like that to do so that you can set that stuff up yourself. They didn't want to learn how to set an IP address on a camera. They didn't want to learn what an RTSP stream was. They didn't want to learn what a door phone was. They didn't want to learn how access control system works. What they wanted was to be able to go to Amazon and order a device and plug it in and sign into an account and have that device work. And Amazon was more than happy to oblige customers when they made that request. Absolutely, we'll make a device for you that you can just ship, that we can just ship you. It'll still be our device. It'll still run our software, and we'll just push updates to it when you want to change to it. We'll make that change. You let us know, and as long as it suits our business model, we'll go ahead and make that change. And then we'll render that service to you. And so for the last 3, 5, 7 years, that has been an acceptable solution, and people all over the country have been more than happy to let Amazon run their doorbells and run their cameras and let package delivery people open their trunks to put things in. I mean, you name it, they're willing to violate a boundary or give up a privacy boundary that they had, because it's convenient and it's easy and it doesn't require me to understand any of this technobabble nonsense. I just signed up for the thing and I plug the thing in, right? Amazon Sidewalk is Amazon taking what somebody else paid for and somebody else maintains and somebody else owns and redistributing that to other people to benefit the Amazon brand. If you are a person and you are looking at these little tracker things and you're going, well, maybe I can go the Apple route or I can go the Amazon route. Well, Apple has made a very similar statement, right? They've gone a similar direction. Everybody that has an iPhone is participating in the Apple ecosystem. And so it's very easy for them to say, hey, this little tracker thing is picked up by an iPhone, send it back to home base, and we'll let the guy know that, it was seen here last. And since a lot of people have iPhones, that works, right? So Amazon is they're just following the exact same model. Hey, if Apple can do that with their devices, we can do that with our devices. But there's a problem. Apple is typically having their customers pay for cell phone service so they have LTE. Amazon isn't going to do that. And they're not about to bury fiber and trench fiber in and all of the things, but they want to be able to provide internet, or they want their customers to have access to internet. So what do? You steal it from the people that already have it. And you just turn it on by default and share that out, and anybody that walks by will just be able to pick up that signal and have internet. And as long as you're Amazon, you control those devices, you can choose where that internet goes. But at the end of the day, still my internet, still my devices, still my bandwidth, and Amazon is taking it. Now, they're not taking a big slice of it. There is a maximum bandwidth cap of 80 kilobits per second, and it's also capped at 500 megs total. And so it's not going to drain you or slow your internet down or any of those kinds of things, but it is a decided step over the line in terms of privacy. It is a decided step over the line of what should be acceptable and what we should expect from these companies that we do business with. And so just understand, if you're paying for an Echo, if you're paying for a Ring, if you're paying for security cameras or outdoor lights or motion detectors, understand that you are furthering Amazon's business model, and it's going to ideally be beholden to them. They'll decide what's good, and when it benefits them, they will take everything to include part of your network traffic or part of your network available bandwidth, and they'll share it with other people. KDE 5.2 or 5.12 22.0 has been released, and with all desktop environments, the best thing I can tell you is to go try it out for yourself. But they have a number of improvements. Adaptive transparency, which means that maximizing a window causes the panel and panel widgets to turn opaque. There is transitions to Plasma System Monitor from the K-SysGuard. Plasma Wayland now supports activities. Activities doesn't get enough attention. I tell you what, I was having a discussion the other day. Activities is one of those things that if you use your computer for more than one purpose, like let's say work and personal, activities is such a clean, easy way to separate those things out. It's unbelievable. System settings now opens to a speed dial, providing easy access to commonly used settings, and you have improved accessibility and keyboard navigation. Purism is going to be shipping. They're finally going to be shipping their phone. Now, here's the deal. I am a huge fan of the Pine phone, and I've talked ad nauseum at how much I like the Pine phone and what a good job I think they do. But one of the things that has always been in the background for me is purism. And Librem actually came out before the Pine phone. It's just some of the decisions that they made I've not entirely agreed with. And so if you don't have anything nice to say, just don't say anything at all. Now I have something nice to say. The Librem 5, a security and privacy focused phone, is shipping. And this represents an opportunity for you to take back control of your private information in your digital life through free and open source software. And I want to be clear about this. The efforts that Librem has led with GNOME and the mobile interface from GNOME is in large part why Pine is able to have so many options that they have, as a lot of that work was first spearheaded by the Librem folks. And certainly they've gone off, and partnered with KDE and done all of those things, and now there's all sorts of different mobile operating systems that you can run. But the Librem was one of the first phones out there, to prioritize this kind of thing. And so they started with their laptop, and now they've gone to the phone. One of the things that I really appreciate about the Librem is it's entirely built in the United States. And so that means that it's a premium version of the phone, built with privacy by default, made entirely in the United States. Has hardware kill switches, specifically designed hardware that puts you in control of the flow of information, and it's shipping. You can just order one. Now here's the downside. The specs are a 5.7 IPS display, so 720 by 1440. Processor is a 1.5 gigahertz, comes with 3 gigabytes of RAM. Storage is 32 gigs of eMMC. Wireless, you get 802.11 ABGN, 2.4 gigahertz, 5 gigahertz, Bluetooth 4. There's a baseband radio in it. It has GPS. There's a smart card reader. There's sound, external storage with micro USB and accelerometer. Front camera has 8 megapixels, rear camera 13 megapixels, includes a vibration motor and a Type-C charger. The cost on this phone, $1,999. $1,999 with a phone that has 32 gigabytes of storage and 3 gigabytes of RAM. I like Librem. I like Purism. I'm glad that there's competition out there. I'm glad that Pine are not the only people that are making a device. But seriously, $2,000 for a phone with 32 gigs of RAM, 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of storage. I can walk into any mobile provider under the sun and buy a phone with 128 gigs of storage for less than $500. And I get that there is an increased expense for doing something very custom and very niche. I understand that there's an even additional expense when you're doing something that's made in the United States. But you are talking about such a fraction of a fraction of a fraction of an audience of somebody who is going to purchase a phone that has, frankly, an unproven operating system. I have used every mobile operating system out, any mainstream mobile operating system that has any hope of going anywhere. I've at least tried it. And none of them are fit for daily drivers today. You might be able to use it as a daily driver if the only thing you do is make calls and receive texts, check emails. But if you have banking apps, if you have a requirement to be on any sort of platform, it's just not going to work as a daily driver. It might work as a secondary device, and gosh, do I love my Pine phone for being able to experiment on other operating system. Gosh, do I love my Sailfish OS Sony Xperia for having a secondary device that supports full disk encryption, a proper Linux shell. I like all of those things. I'm happy to play with all of those things. None of them cost me even a fraction of $2,000. And so, listen, if you're a person that can afford to spend $2,000 on a Librem 5 because you value privacy and you value the fact that it's built in the United States of America, then God bless you. I'm happy that you're out there, and I'm happy that there's a person there that's willing to support this company that is clearly doing some really amazing things. But at $2,000, you're so far above and beyond you're twice the cost of every premium phone that's out there. You're twice the cost of the premium iPhone. You're twice the cost of the premium Galaxy Samsung phone. And your app market space is a fraction of what the Google Play Store is. Your app store is a fraction of what the iOS App Store is. And so you're really banking on the fact that people are so concerned about privacy that they're willing to spend twice the amount of money on a phone that has a fraction of the specifications, a fraction of the applications. And I just don't think that's a realistic perspective. And so I hope to be wrong. Please prove me wrong. Please somebody go out there and buy this device and tell me how great it is and write in and tell me that I'm wrong. I want to be wrong on this. But I feel like this is not the place, or we have a mismatch between what the company is trying to achieve and what their target audience is. There is definitely, undeniably people out there that care more about privacy than app space. In fact, I'm one of them to a certain extent. My real information, the things that I actually care about and don't want to get out there, there's no way I would put that on an iOS device or an Android device. I just wouldn't, because I just can't trust the platform, and there's too many people knocking at it and cracking at it. There are too many solutions out there from extracting data off of it. I just wouldn't do it. And so I'm one of the people that would gladly pay probably $400 or $500, maybe $600-$700 for a device if it was a really good device that I could invest in the future of mobile operating systems and security and privacy by default. But that's not what I feel like I'm doing here. That wouldn't be that wouldn't be the result I think I would achieve. Frankly, I think that if I'm looking for a device, the Pine phone at $200 is an investment in the ability to play with other mobile operating systems. And it helps fund a company that continues to make not just phones, but tablets, laptops, soldering irons, smartwatches. Every device that exists in the mainstream, places like Pine are coming out and saying, we have a more freedom-respecting, privacy-respecting solution. All of them from Pine OS, and this is the way that they advertise them, all of them are essentially developer devices. They're devices to get familiar with. And for that, they are fantastic. But I wouldn't use any of them as a daily driver. And so I somewhat question if I could use something like the Purism 5 as a daily driver. I suspect that I wouldn't. And so, again, if I'm wrong, please write me up and tell me, live at AskNoahShow.com, or give me a call at 1-855-450-NOAH. I would love to hear a different perspective on this. And anybody from Librem has an open invitation to come on the program and chat with us and help me understand what I'm missing here. So I wish them the best of luck, but I was disappointed to see the price tag. Matrix has some interesting developments. So we talked a little bit about Spaces and the fact that they've launched Spaces. Now, this is the replacement for Community. It has, as I've begun to really dig in and try to apply this to my working environment and my personal communication strategy, really, what I found is Spaces are absolutely unequivocally necessary when communication platforms start to scale. One of the biggest problems that Discord, Slack, Telegram, all of them have is there's no real control over what ends up being noise. Because if you have one platform to rule them all, which Matrix undeniably is, the problem quickly becomes, if I have one communication platform for personal, one communication platform for this work, one communication platform for that work, and one communication platform for this hobby, it's easy then to say, I'm going to jump on Telegram for this, or Matrix for that, or Slack for this, or email for that. Or Mattermost for this. You can kind of break it up. Once you want to have one single platform, you have a couple of choices. Either you do what I've been doing, which is have multiple accounts and sign into the account for the hat that you're wearing that day, or you go to Spaces. And Spaces is the real answer to that problem. And what it allows you to do is say, hey, right now, I'm working at Alta Speed. So I have 9, 10, 11, 12 rooms that we work at, everything from our software development guys to our sales team, to our back-end business administration people, to our internal IT people, to the main chat that is out with our technicians in the field. And I want to see the traffic from the vast majority of those all day long while I'm at work. I don't want to see traffic from my community channels. I don't want to see traffic, for the most part, from my personal channels unless it's my wife telling me that one of my kids is hurt or something like that. And so there's a select amount of channels I want to watch all of the time, and then there's a select amount of noise I want to tune out. And so today, the way I've been doing that is with multiple accounts. Spaces allows me to start to organize all of those chats into a hierarchy. And the ability to do nested spaces, which is what I've been playing with this week, is absolutely fantastic because it allows me to create Altispeed technologies, and then within that, technical and administrative and sales. And I can jump in and out of those individual subgroups and communicate with those tiny little micro communities and then back to the home. But I've never left my platform. And so when I get a message that comes completely in from left field that I just wasn't thinking about from, maybe it's one of my producers and says, hey, this thing is coming up on Ask Noah next week. Can you answer this quick question, A, B, or C? And it takes me 5 seconds to answer. Every once in a while during my workday, I can be like, breather, go back to click on the home, see all my Matrix chats. Here's all the notifications. Oh, look at that. So-and-so had a question. Jump in there, answer that question, go back into Altispeed, go back to work. I'm done for the day. Move out of the Altispeed space. I go into my personal space. Now I'm only seeing messages from my family and my kids and my wife. Again, same platform. All the buttons are in the same place. All the work, all the things, the way that I copy and paste in or the reactions that I use, all of those things, the things that my mind is automatically tuned to listen for the notifications that admittedly annoying ping that they have. I really would like to change the default notification tone, but my mind automatically, recognizes that or sees the little red notification thing down in the corner. All of those processes are consistent from work to home. It's just now I'm receiving messages or communicating with the people I want to communicate outside of work, and work will wait, and tomorrow will worry about itself. And when I get in the next morning, then I will deal with work stuff, unless it's an emergency, in which case there's a select amount of channels that I'm able to watch outside of work. In addition to that, though, what Matrix has done is they've started to integrate into Thunderbird, which is a particularly interesting to me because I use Thunderbird as my main mail client. So they're using libpurple, and essentially what they're doing is they started with an IRC chat implementation of Thunderbird and have now added the ability to do Matrix. And so you can add a Matrix account. Now, it's by no means finished or perfected, and obviously the vast majority of actual Matrix proper features are going to be missing, but basic things like chats and getting notifications and read notifications even, which didn't exist with IRC but exists, they've added that specifically for Matrix, those are now integrated into Thunderbird. And quite frankly, the concept that someday I could install one application and monitor every email account that I need to keep an eye on, as well as keep an eye on specific chats or all of my chats, all with one application, tells me a couple of things. First of all, it again reinforces this idea that there is real merit in having one chat application to rule them all, or one communication platform that you're on. It also reinforces the idea that this is why we need a completely open source and federated solution, because you'll notice nothing like this exists for Telegram or even Signal. Moxie doesn't really like the idea, even though it's completely open source and the code's out there, it's nothing stopping you from doing it per se. He's not real big on endorsing third-party clients, third-party servers. And Telegram, frankly, just doesn't have the ability to open source the server. They keep promising it, and it just never comes. And so so at the end of the day, that is a cloud service. It is. That's what it is. It just happens to be a very good cloud service that has very good support on Linux and has an open source enough client that you can kind of hack around it in an open API that we can tie to other things. So we like it. But if you're skating to where the puck is going to be rather than where the puck is today, you arrive at Matrix every time. Because the things that they're starting to work on today, again, not feature complete, nothing that I would look at and tell you, this is what you should use to communicate with your business, or this is what you should use to stay in contact with your wife or your kids, or anything like that. But the fact that I can begin to play with using my email client as a one-stop communication shop, that tells me that we're skating to the right place. So huge thanks to Matthew and his team at Matrix for the work that they've done or continue to do on Spaces, as well as these neat little things like getting this tied to libpurple. Also, there is a update on NeoChat, which is the default, which is the messenger native to KDE. And so obviously Element is the Matrix client that is fully supported, has all the features, bells and whistles, and run by the Element crew themselves. But other people have made native clients that are not just WebRTC wrappers around an Element web page, basically, which is what Element is, if we're honest. And one of those is NeoChat. And so I have on the studio machine, I am actually using Nico, NHEKO, which is probably my favorite native client. But NeoChat has released an update as well, so I invite you to check that out. Firefox has redesigned their interface and come out with a new release. Simplified browser Chrome and toolbar, less frequently used items have been removed, and so you can focus on the important navigations items. They've cleaned up and streamlined the menus. They've reorganized and prioritized the menu content according to usage, updated the labels, removed all of the what they're calling iconography. They've updated all of the prompts, and so the info bars, panels, and modems have a much cleaner interface and clearer language. So, for example, when you click on that little icon that says, we want to use your keyboard, when we want to use your microphone and camera, that now has a nice, elegant little pop-up instead of the little boxy thing that used to pop up. It was always effective, but now it just looks a lot nicer. They have inspired tab designs. The floating tabs neatly contain all of the information and surface cues. So when you need them, things like visual indicators for audio controls. They've also rounded the design of the corners to make the active tab support focus and signals and the ability to move between tabs as you need to. They support fewer interruptions, reduced number of alerts and messages, and so that you can browse without being distracted. They have a more cohesive, calmer visual design, lighter iconography with a refined color palette, and a more consistent styling throughout Firefox. And now with the launch of Firefox 89, they're happy to introduce that Firefox private browsing windows will now include the innovations of total cookie protection, which we've covered on the show before. That means, in short, that when you open a private window, each one of the websites that you visit is going to be given a separate cookie jar, and it will store the cookies for that website only. And that will prevent cross-site that will prevent sites from looking in the cookie jar of other sites. And so cookies can no longer be used to follow you from one site to the other and gather your browser history. Now, this came out earlier in February this year. That's when they came out with the total cookie protection. Again, you can go back and listen to previous episodes where we dug into that a little bit more. But this is a new extra strong protection against cross-site tracking and cookies. And since Firefox 86, total cookie protection has been available for all users who have FTP strict mode enabled. And with Firefox 89, they're extending that protection to private browsing windows. OBS has a new release, OBS Studio 27.0. They've added source visibility transitions, which allow you to set a transition for a source when showing it or hiding it. They've added service integrations, and so the browser dock can support, this works in both macOS and Linux, and you can actually control certain functions in the browser from this browser dock. They've added support for Wayland on Linux, and this includes a new Pipewire capture source. So if you're using Wayland and Ubuntu users 20.10 or newer, also I'll point out that Fedora shipped day one with Pipewire support, and you'll have the opportunity to do that in OBS 27.0. They've added a track mat for stinger transitions, as well as they support a scene mask to display parts of the previous and current scene at the same time. They've added a visual camera toggle to the system tray and automatic rotation on video capture devices, which can now be manually disabled. They've also added the auto reset option to the Video for Linux source to handle dropouts when certain devices are no longer available. Make sure to check out OBS Studio 27.0. It's what we use here at the Ask Noah Show to stream the episode and record it each and every week. A few weeks ago, we interviewed Steve Ovens and invited him onto the program to discuss an introduction to networking. We then did a follow-up segment, Networking Part 2, so that you could get a better understanding of how to get started managing your network at home or setting up a home lab. Now, in the field, I obviously, these days I don't do as much in the field work as I would like. I'm stuck behind a computer doing a lot of administrative tasks. So I've invited our lead installer, Kenny Schmidt, to join us on this episode of Ask Noah to discuss some of the things that we've seen in the field and how we can apply some of those concepts to solve programs. So welcome into the program.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So you had indicated before off air a little bit, you'd said, hey, I had something to add to the feedback segment. And you wanted to address the guy who says, hey, I want one keyboard and mouse to control them all.
So Logitech provides a hardware solution to this. So Noah had mentioned Synergy as a software solution where you can install a program on your computers that you'd like to switch from, and it'll seamlessly switch your keyboard and mouse from those different systems. If you wanted to be you're a little bit worried about some of the implications, the security implications, like Noah had mentioned about a program and a company having access to your keyboard and mouse on your system, there's another answer to that, and that is the Logitech MX series. So the MX series includes their Ergo mouse, their vertical mouse, and their master mouse. So a productivity and then a better ergonomic solution, and then also a vertical mouse. So it literally changes the orientation from your hand being horizontal to vertical. And those are the three options they provide for mouses. And then the other one, there's a keyboard as well that has the same functionality, and that is the K780 multi-device wireless keyboard. So this is just a really nice way that you can basically use function keys, so FN F1, FN F2, and FN F3, to change between 3 different computers. And then on the mouse, there are 3 different profiles that you can select from for 3 different systems. So this could be your desktop, your phone, and say a tablet if you're wanting to use that, or his use case as well.
Yeah, and what I like about that, Kenny, is that would actually work really well with a desktop, whereas my solution, not so much.
Correct. Yeah, exactly.
That's very cool. So then the only thing he'd have to deal with is he'd manually switch the input devices separate from the display device. And so you still have to have some sort of a HDMI or DisplayPort switch to switch the displays, but then you could potentially use the keyboard and switch in the hardware and just change what you're connected to. Now, here's a question for you. Could you install a couple different Unify receivers and pair to different Unify receivers, or does that switching only work with Bluetooth?
That switching, I believe, only works with Bluetooth.
Okay, well, very cool. Well, there's one more option for you if you need to switch between different machines. So, Kenny, you're out in the field, so you're the guy that goes and you walk in on site and somebody says, hey, I have this problem XYZ, and then you say, okay, I'm going to take my knowledge of networking and I'm going to implement a solution. And so, a few weeks ago, you went out to a site and came out, and it was a property that had a guest computer, and they'd plugged in a guest computer, and they just plugged it into their network, and they were like, there's a network jack over there, we'll just plug it in right there. And they plug it in, and sure enough, the thing comes online, and now the guests have internet. So they think this is great. And so you roll up and you take a look at this. I think you came out there to install a printer, and you took one look at it and said, guys, this is not exactly PCI compliant. You can't do it this way. You have to separate these out. But now you have a problem, because the router and the network operations center is 300 feet, 500 feet from where this computer is? Running a wire in that building it was built in 1950. It was not designed for structured wiring, and that's putting it kindly. So running another wire, that's like a day and a half job. So what do we do when we have one physical run from one location to the other, and but you have to have 2 separate networks? How did you solve that?
Well, the answer simply is VLANs. We went to a virtual infrastructure for our LANs. We set up the way the site was originally set up was they had 2 different LAN ports on their router, one for an admin network and one for a guest network. The guest network, of course, was for, the access points. So that way you come into say it's a coffee shop or a hotel, you'd get connected to the guest Wi-Fi, and you wouldn't have access to any of their, say printers or credit card readers or any of those major infrastructure pieces that you would have. And that segments them out.
And just to be clear, so that is being done on like a Netgate 3100, or we have our own in-house built one that we call a Pro Security Gateway. But those are essentially running either pfSense or a fork of pfSense that and then there are physical interfaces out on the front, and we've assigned one for the WAN, we've assigned one for the administrative LAN, and then one for the guest LAN.
Correct. And that's the beauty of pfSense. So this particular case, we had deployed our PSG, so our AltaSpeed Pro Security Gateway. And as said, they had plugged into the wrong ports, and they started putting things on the admin network. So the nice thing is pfSense allows us the flexibility of both. So we can do a hardware LAN setup. So we have on the PSG, there's actually 5 interface ports. So we can have up to 5 physical LANs, or we can set VLANs on any of them and have potentially as many as you'd want. I think you had mentioned, how many were you able to get on there at one time with VLANs? I was trying to demonstrate to somebody the power of the SG1100, and the client had said, well, I don't want the SG1100 because it only has 2 network jacks, or maybe 3. Does it have an out port? I can't remember, but he was concerned that there weren't enough jacks, and I said, well, with VLANs and the way that pfSense handles interfaces, it doesn't really matter. And he goes, what do you mean? So we took an HP 48 port switch,
and I created 48 different networks out of the SG1100 and connected one port out of the SG1100 to a trunk port on the HP switch and said, look, plug into any one of the other 47 ports and you get a different IP address on a different LAN. All separate firewall rules, separate DHCP servers, the whole 9 yards, separated out over 48 ports. And so the power is in the software, not necessarily in the hardware configuration. Once we've connected a pfSense device to a switch, we have an unlimited amount of interfaces because we can just keep stacking switches.
Yeah, and the beauty of the free and open source solution is that software is provided to you openly, right? So we can go ahead and grab that software and implement it into our own hardware device. So we've found at Altispeed, we've created this little 1U unit that we can sell for an affordable price because we're able to produce it in-house and basically take it and load pfSense onto this device with the 5 interface ports. So you're able to get a 1U rack unit pfSense box
or a fork of
cheaper.
pfSense, just to be for legality and stuff like that. They don't actually allow you to load pfSense onto the box itself for legality reasons. So we should be clear about that. But the idea is that you can go download this software and put it onto any device that you want. And certainly if you're a home user, there's nothing stopping you from repurposing a computer and loading pfSense on that.
Yeah. Absolutely. So getting back to kind of how this infrastructure was set up was we had migrated them essentially from a physical LAN interface where they had 2 different LANs running on 2 different ports on their router, and we had just basically simplified that down. So now we recreated those same LANs as VLANs on pfSense, and then we just implemented a small little 5-port managed switch that we could send both of those VLANs over a trunk port to essentially their front desk where they had already had a second switch at their front desk, and we just assigned 2 individual ports which devices are on which networks. So for this case, the guest kiosk PC, we assigned to the guest network as you would expect, and the guest printer onto that same VLAN, and then all of the admin devices, so like your credit card readers, your front desk computers, and all those kinds of things were moved back onto the admin network like you would expect.
And in pfSense, how long do you think it takes to set up, to go in there to the interface tab and break out this thing? Is this a big complicated process that takes hours to do?
No, and pfSense makes this actually incredibly easy. It's literally just a matter of selecting one of your interfaces. So in this case, we have 5, so we'll use interface 5, for example. So we create a new VLAN, or we enable interface 5, and then in pfSense, we go ahead and create a VLAN, and then we assign that VLAN to that interface. So we say, we want VLAN 10, which is our admin one, to be on interface 5. Okay? Perfect. So that's good. So now we have one VLAN running, and then now we can just keep assigning new VLANs to that same interface. So we can create another VLAN, say 20. Guest network. So now we've created that VLAN and we've assigned that to that same interface on port 5. And then once we have all of those set, we can go in and create rules. So in the firewall, we can create rules for, I would like traffic to be able to talk to, if you're on the guest network, I don't want you talking to anything on the admin network. And if you're on the admin network, I do want you to be able to talk to all the stuff on the guest network, which is incredibly useful when you're as a technician working on this stuff, because you don't have to plug into, I have to switch over to the guest network real quick. As long as I have access to the admin network, I can still troubleshoot all the issues on the guest side of things, which is just incredibly useful.
Well, it opens us up a little bit too, because we can keep client isolation on the guest side. So on the guest side, those devices can only talk to their gateway and get out to the world. They can't talk to each other. Whereas from the admin side, if you need to log in, like you're saying, you need to log into the web UI of the printer to do something, or you want to create a specific rule that says the printer can talk to the guest computer, but that's the only cross talk we want going on. Nothing else can happen. We can do all of those with firewall rules inside of the router, and then we're managing it all from one central device.
Correct. Yeah. Once you've really learned the fundamentals of the different aspects of pfSense, so say for example, interfaces. Once you understand how interfaces work in pfSense, you can really do anything you want. Or once you understand VLANs, it's just a matter of learning each one of those little parts, and then you can basically you learn the rules so that way you can break the rules, right? So we figure out, hey, you're supposed to set them up this way. Well, I want to be able to talk to everything both ways, or I don't want to be able to talk to everything both ways, or like you had mentioned, just specific devices being able to talk. So it's really a matter of they allow you the flexibility, and you just kind of learn the rules. And once you've learned those rules, you can break them or get creative with how you want to set up your network.
So you have had experience with HP switches, and you've had experience with Unify switches, and then those are kind of enterprise grade. Like there's a certain expectation, and for the most part, they all kind of work the same way. And then you get into some of the lower brand, cheaper, dare I say, switches, And then you start seeing like the Netgears and the TP-Links and those kinds. Now, I have a TP-Link switch that runs at my house, and I've really been happy with it. I have a little Netgear one that I travel with and I take with me, and it's okay. What have you seen if somebody's out there and they're listening and they're saying, hey, I want to explore this stuff, what Noah and Kenny are talking about. I want to go play with this in my house, but I don't have $600 to go buy an HP Enterprise HPE switch or a Dell EMC switch. What would you recommend somebody get started with to kind of play with and kind of wrap their head around it on a budget?
Absolutely. And you had mentioned TP-Link. That's exactly where I would start. TP-Link has a really nice budget option with their 5-port managed switch that you could get into. The nice thing about the TP-Link is that it makes assigning and configuring all of your VLANs in the switch very simple. You had also mentioned Netgear. What the problem with the Netgear switches that I found is when you assign the interfaces, they only let you do them per VLAN. So you go to VLAN 10 and then it shows you 5 ports on the switch and you can set those 5, and then you have to switch to VLAN 20 or whatever other VLANs you might be setting up. And that gets problematic because when you're trying to wrap your head around some of this VLAN stuff, it can be very difficult trying to go, okay, that route's there. Well, this one route's here. And you lose track of things when you can't just look at an overview, see of all of the devices here or all of the LANs and VLANs there. So what the nice thing about the TP-Links is they give you basically, it looks like a little Excel spreadsheet of, at the top it shows all of your VLANs and then all of your ports, and you can just go through and say, I want this one tagged with VLAN 10, I want this one tagged with VLAN 20, I want this one untagged, and you can go through and just hit checkboxes and put a number in those checkboxes. So it really makes, for beginners, TP-Link, that it's a nice budget and it has a really nice, easy interface to use.
We'll have a link for you in the show notes at podcast.asknoahshow.com. Kenny, you know you have a welcome invitation. Anytime you want to come, we'll do this again soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me on.
And a huge thanks to Kenny for swinging by and being able to do that with us. We really appreciate it. Hey, the music in my ears means we're out of time. Before I go, I want to let you know of a couple of resources again. South this weekend, coming up Friday, Saturday. Make sure to join southeastlinuxfest.org. Stay up to date with all of the information. We're hosting it on Matrix. You can sign up for an account at linuxdelta.com, matrix.linuxdelta.com. Get connected to the Geek Lab. Hey, all of the articles and references that we do, they are published at podcast.asknoahshow.com. Check them out there. Follow us on Twitter at Ask Noah Show. We'll see you next week, 6 p.m. Tuesday. Have a great week.